What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of StoryHive on Location, Vancouver, with beats, eats, and more. I'm your host, Kazi. We are broadcasting live right now on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. Utmost love, respect, and gratitude to the original stewards and protectors of these lands, of these waters. This episode is also powered by StoryHive, and tonight, I'm very excited for this next guest. This is our first meet, aka our meet cute at this current moment. We're joined by someone who has become one of the driving forces behind Vancouver's modern jazz scene. Tim Reinert is the founder of Infidels Jazz, a podcast turned record label and concert series that's produced over 800 shows across the city and released more than a dozen albums. A lifelong record store head and jazz devotee, Tim has been building spaces where creative music can thrive, from local innovators to legends like the Sun Ra Orchestra and Pat Metheny. Y'all, welcome to the show, Tim Reinert.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. How are we feeling?
Feeling great. Thank you so much.
Yes, I have come correct with another beautiful charcuterie plate that, we will munch on throughout the show. So I'd love to start with knowing, we always talk about early beginnings of our creative journeys. And I had learned and read that you grew up in small town in Kitimat, which is like far up north, close to Haida, or like same latitude line.
Same level. Kitimat and Terrace.
Okay.
So Kitimat when I was younger, and then when I was around 12, we moved to Terrace, which is like a half hour away. And I was involved in music basically my whole life, but I fell in love with jazz when I was about 13 years old, and which is not something that 13-year-olds in small towns typically do. And I was kind of on my own, but I fell in love with, we started with like big band music. So Benny Goodman, Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Duke Ellington, that was the music I really fell in love with, which made me really, really popular in high school, as you can imagine.
Well, what was the big sounds back at that time?
This would have been right before grunge, so late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
So hip hop was definitely a thing, and it was huge, but it wasn't huge yet.
Yeah.
Run DMC and Beastie Boys and things like that. But Nirvana was a thing, and Green Day was a thing, and Pearl Jam was a thing, and things for other people, not so much for me. But but that's okay. Jazz is the music I really fell in love with early on, and as I got older, I kind of decided that I wanted to be a jazz musician, and I wanted to be a jazz drummer, and I fell in love with that, and I was sure that that was going to be my career. And so I moved here, and like a lot of musicians in Canada, I went to Capilano University, and I did that for not very long before I realized that you really need to have a lot of talent to become a jazz drummer. And I realized right after that I didn't have any talent. And so I figured out pretty early that I love this and I need to be part of it, but playing it was definitely not in the cards for me.
Backtrack to 13.
Yeah.
Who introduced you to your first jazz album that made you like, whoa,
Yeah.
what is this?
So that was my high school band teacher. And my parents they wanted me to join high school band or junior high school band. This is grade 8 or 9 at the time. But they wanted me to play the trumpet. And I did not want to play the trumpet. And so the teacher, because at the time I could already read and write music, and so he asked if I would consider playing the drums, because at the time, having a drummer that could read music wasn't a thing that happened all the time back up there. And so I said yes. My father said absolutely not.
Really?
And then I said even more so yes. And so that was my thing. So he made me tapes. He made me tapes of drummers like Philly Joe Jones and Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson and a lot of the great drummers from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And that's really where I started. And he made me tapes with rock music and things like that too, but that did not stick at all. So that's where I first got the bug.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about what the jazz scene was like in Vancouver at that time. And were you starting to get involved with it then, or was this your record store era?
It was both, actually. At the same time, I started doing a lot of MCing for Coastal Jazz and Blues, which is the organization that puts on the Vancouver International Jazz Festival, and they're still around. And I MC'd concerts for them from, I want to say, 1995 till very recently.
That's amazing.
And when they would get touring artists in, I would introduce them, tell people about their stories. I would do more for the local scene. And the local scene here has always been, because of Capilano, being very full of very talented people. And the scene here has a thriving straight ahead jazz scene, people who are influenced by Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk and people like that. But also it's always had a really strong experimental and free jazz scene. And in the 90s, that's when I really started to get into that. And we have a lot of musicians who still play in the scene today who kind of came up during that era. And because of the support of the Jazz Festival, they were really able to make strong careers for themselves. So, part of my life was paying the bills and working in record stores. And thankfully, back then, you could live in Vancouver and work in record stores, which sounds just insane today. Yeah. But I did it for a long time and very grateful to have done it. But then I got to do a lot of work in the jazz scene and trying to help in a very small way, because at the time I wasn't organizing, I was just MCing. But I still got to know a lot of people, and that's really where I kind of got involved with the scene for the first time. And until fairly recently, I would MC for other organizations, not just Coastal. But I'm too busy for that these days. There's too many Infidels shows to MC. So
yeah. So flash forward now, in the 2020s.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind starting Infidels Jazz? And it started as a podcast.
It started as a podcast in 2019,
yes.
And then became the label, and then became the shows. And for me, what it was by this point, I wasn't working in record stores anymore, and I missed it so much. I missed being part of the community. I would MC shows, but I felt that I wasn't really contributing the way that I had contributed in the past. And at the time, the scene was honestly struggling. Yeah. There was shows that Frankie's Jazz Club was doing really well, thanks to Corey Weeds. Tyrant Studios was doing really well, thanks to Daniel Dirksen, who runs that great space. But there wasn't much else. There was some things, but not much. And so I started the podcast in 2019 with the goal that one of the major focuses would be to focus on local artists. And so I would promote those artists on the podcast as much as possible. And then I started to almost immediately realize that I was getting a serious itch to contribute more. And then we would have probably started in 2020, but then things happened in the world, and
oh yeah, just that crazy thing that happened.
That crazy thing. We don't need to talk about that thing.
The panini, we like to call.
The panini. Okay. So things got put on hold, but I still started the record label in that time, and we put out an album by two local musicians named Kenton Lowen and JP Carter.
I really like the Kenton Lowen one.
Yeah. Kenton's great. He's a good pal, so is JP. We put that out. And the idea was that I would put out a record label, and then every once in a while I would do a concert to support the label. That is not how things turned out, obviously. One of the things that happened is I got reached, a club on Davie Street, a bar on Davie Street reached out because, like a lot of venues during the pandemic, they were struggling and they were trying to figure out ways to get people in. And so they reached out and said, would you be able to help us out and put something together and put together a show? And so we did that. And that was in October of 2021. And we sold out immediately. And that was with a great trumpet player who lives in Brooklyn now named Chris Davis. And we did another one and that sold out. And then another one and that sold out. And we were able to do this during the pandemic. You know, we were masking and following all the rules.
Yeah.
And at the time, you could kind of skirt around the rules a little bit because you couldn't call it a concert, but people could come to the bar while musicians were playing. So that's kind of, which seems ridiculous, but that's how we got around it.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately other venues started reaching out, and then I started reaching out to other venues. And that's when I got the idea of having different series fit different needs in the community. So if you go to our shows, you'll see that not all the shows are the same. So the shows that are at this venue are different than the shows at another venue. Some shows feature very young, developing talent. Some feature veteran musicians who've been on the scene for a long time. Some of the series are more experimental. Some are more straight ahead. And as you come to shows, you kind of figure out which is the right fit for you.
Right.
And we started that really early on. And I think by May of the next year, we were doing 4 regular series. We're doing, I think, 12 now, in addition to the bigger one-off shows that we do. And that's where it all started. And by the end of 2022, we had done dozens and dozens of concerts, and the demand was there. The more we did, the more people wanted us to do. And so we kind of moved the focus, or I should say expanded the focus, not just from local musicians, which is always going to be our main priority, but to touring artists and to people who would come to town, American musicians. And that has been something that has been absolutely incredible and terrifying at the same time. And as Infidels has grown, as you mentioned, we've presented over 800 concerts now. We're able to do bigger and bigger shows. And that just gets bigger every single month. In February, I think we produced over 50 shows. This month will be 44, I think, 45, something like that. It's become a little bit of everything for everybody.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the main things is making sure that people realize knowing about Orna Coleman is nice, knowing about Miles Davis is nice, Ella Fitzgerald, that's great. And if you're the kind of person that needs to have that knowledge to help, wonderful. We have shows for you. We've got jazz nerd shows.
Just for you.
Just for you. But if you don't know, we want you to come. That doesn't matter. We want you to come. We want you to have a great time. At the end of the day, being entertained is as important, at least to me, as being educated. And so people don't necessarily want to learn all the things that, you know, jazz nerds know. Sometimes it's okay just to come and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Just listen to music.
Just listen to music and socialize with people and be part of the community. I'm not the one who's actually creating the reason why people come. People come for the music. And I'm not creating any of that.
Right.
So for me to be the face of it and to talk about it and talk about how great we are, it feels very weird for me because at the end of the day, people come for the musicians. And the musicians are the people that we should always be talking about and putting front and center. A lot of musicians, they don't, it's not even if they're good or bad is almost irrelevant. They don't want to spend time doing it. They want to be great musicians.
Yeah.
And, one of the downfalls of having big record chains go away and having record labels less interested or less involved with developing artists is that we've kind of sold musicians a bit of a fake bill of goods. And we've kind of told them, hey, you can do anything. You don't need an agent. You don't need a manager. You get to do everything. You get to keep more money. You can write it yourself. You can record at home. You can do all these things. And that sounds really good until you realize you have to do everything.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to do everything. And so now it's not good enough that you're just an amazing trumpet player. We tell them that they have to be accountants and social media experts and all these things that they're like, I just want to play the trumpet, man. And so, if there's something that Infidels does that I'm very proud of, it allows them to focus on the things they really want to focus on. If a musician really wants to be involved with the promotion of their show, that's great. Happy to have them be involved. But if they just want to play their horn, that's great too.
That must have been so trippy for you to see all of a sudden all these stores closing down, and we just I remember the moment. I was in university at the time when because I went to school for broadcast and media stuff.
Okay.
Surprise, surprise. Here
Surprise,
we are.
surprise.
But I remember this one class where they had the logos up, Netflix and Spotify, and being like, the future is streaming, everyone. It's coming for us. And mass, traditional media and TV, it's starting to go. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Much music leaving? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And, so.
I remember being in meetings with record labels where they were just had their head in the sand, completely not wanting to acknowledge, oh, no, look, this is decades away. This is nothing to worry about. This is totally fine. We're all going to be here forever. And the first showing of that things were going to go bad really quickly was, a lot of my friends who worked for record labels losing their jobs. And this started happening in, 2004, 2005, 2006. And people who were incredibly good at what they did, and their job just didn't exist anymore. And this was a real, wake-up call for a lot of people in the industry. Because if the record labels can't even hold people, then are we going to have jobs? And the answer was no. Eventually, none of us had jobs. Now, thankfully, there's still record stores, and they're thriving. And that physical component is much, much smaller. But I think it's kind of healthier.
Explain. I like this perspective.
I think it's healthier because if you go to Neptune Records on an average Saturday afternoon, that place is packed. If you go to Beat Street, which is right around the corner from here, that place is packed all the time. So it's smaller, but the people who are in that culture and in that community they're not going anywhere. It's more sustainable. You can concentrate on just having one really great store and having people come to that one really great store. Now, the trade-off is that nobody's getting rich. Yeah. And the trade-off is it's a lot harder. We're all working harder to keep that culture going. It's
true. It's expensive to press.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we did our first vinyl last year, and I lost a fortune, and I was so happy to do it because I got to have our label got to have a record, and for me as a vinyl person, that was a huge deal for me. But we lost money, and I'm totally fine with it. But it's hard to, being small has its benefits, but it means you're small. That's the trade-off. So.
I'm curious to know, what do you think people misunderstand about jazz today? If there's anything that they misunderstand about it.
Everything. I could talk about this forever. Jazz is kind of a unique art form in that we have kind of told people that you have to have cheat codes to like it. And you have to be really knowledgeable. And you have to know who played with who. And you have to know...
Kind of like a snobby, inaccessible
Totally.
art form type thing.
Totally. And I think that the people who love jazz, sometimes myself included, have unfortunately propagated that. And we've turned it into a museum music. And we say, well, you need to have this kind of knowledge, and you have to, before you listen to that album, you need to listen to that album, and you need to listen to it properly, and you have to maybe go to school, and you have to, and you have to, and you have to. And eventually people just go, I just want to listen to the record, man. This is really terrible. Like, this is now it's homework.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be homework, right? So I think one of the misunderstandings people have is that you have to have all this knowledge to appreciate it. I think that is, and I think a younger me would have maybe agreed with that. Now that I'm older, I don't agree with it at all. And I think that anything we can do to just make people negotiate with the music on its own terms or on their terms, I think as long as you're listening, that's really all that matters. So I think that's one of the big misunderstandings. I think the other big misunderstanding is that this is still a vital, growing, living music. You know, jazz changes. That's one of the things, like, it's supposed to change.
It's fundamental.
Yeah, it's like built in. It's not a negative, it's a positive. Some people struggle with that. Some people who love jazz struggle with that. So there's a lot of debate within jazz about what's jazz. What is the name? Like, even the name is controversial. There's a lot of people who don't love the name.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of racially charged negative baggage attached to the name. And to this day, you'll find a lot of really preeminent, top-notch, world-class jazz musicians who won't use the name.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot of debate. I use the name because we all decided, for better or for worse, that's the name. If someone wants to change the name, I'll go with that too. Doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
But the lack of understanding that it's a living, breathing music is another big misunderstanding. It's supposed to change. When you go back into jazz history and if you were able to have a time machine, you took the music of Thelonious Monk and you brought that back to the 30s, to Louis Armstrong, and you played that for him, he would not know what he was listening to because it was so fundamentally different than what he was playing. And if you take the music from John Coltrane in the 60s back to people who were playing in the early 50s, they wouldn't know what that was either. The music's supposed to evolve. It's supposed to change. And we aren't necessarily supposed to love all of it. It's okay not to love all of it. Not everything has to be for everyone.
It's true.
And jazz is a big music. It's a big tent music. And it's totally fine to find your little spot and sit on that stool and be comfortable with that. I want to know the new thing. I'm always about what's next, and that's great for me. And we have concerts for those kind of people and people who want to explore. But if all you love is, the jazz of the 1950s, great. There's a lot of stuff for you too. So just the idea of recognizing that the music is supposed to change and that's okay, that's another big thing.
Yeah, I'm curious about what kind of ecosystem you're trying to build through Infidels Jazz, and are there any gaps that you're wanting to fill within the community and the scene?
So for me, the big thing was bringing jazz into the music community in Vancouver. And the jazz community has a tendency to kind of think that it's a little better than everybody else. And so we have our own clubs. You know, there's jazz clubs, and we have our own venues, and we kind of think that we're a little better than everyone else. And that is fine if jazz clubs are doing well enough to pay the bills, but they're not.
Yeah.
And so what Infidels did is bring jazz to the community. And so if there's music happening here, we'll bring jazz to you. So one of the things that we do is we put shows at venues that you wouldn't necessarily think of as jazz venues, like the American. You know, that's not you would not think that was a jazz venue, but that was jazz. That was a great jazz show. Or the Fox, or the Pearl, or the Rickshaw. You know, and we're bringing jazz to these venues, to the community, and we're telling people, hey, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know this stuff. We'll bring it to you, and you can enjoy it. If you want to come to jazz clubs, great, we have jazz clubs. You can come to those too. But it is not necessary. And so that, I think, was one of the things that really kind of set us apart at the beginning. The part that's missing is, for me, the priority this year is the suburbs. And the priority is to not ignore the fact that Surrey is this massively growing space.
It's its own city.
It's its own city.
Yep.
There's these vibrant cultures in New West and Richmond and Maple Ridge and West Vancouver, and I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm missing a few.
Port Moody.
Yeah, sorry, Port Moody.
Yeah. But you're right. And also the millennial generation who are moving out there, raising kids, they also deserve to listen to good music.
Absolutely. And so this year, what we're trying to actively do is bring some of our club shows out to these areas.
This is excellent.
And bring, you know, weekly and monthly shows. We don't have anything to announce on that yet, but it's a top priority because there's millions of people living in these areas.
And they can't come here all the time.
They can't always come here, and we expect them to. And so one of the things you're going to see is when I do a bigger show is have the show do a Vancouver show, but then that same show will do one in Richmond and one in Burnaby and maybe one in North Vancouver. Because in my opinion, the market's big enough for that. And it's kind of, we'll see if that works. But I mean, it works in Quebec, it works in Ontario. They have, of course, the population density is much more than here. But we still have millions of people who live here. And so to say, hey, you know, there's millions of people here, but the ones that I only really care about are the people that live in Mount Pleasant or East Vancouver. I mean, that's not really fair. Yeah. So that's the part that's missing. And that's the part that I'm focused on.
We actually are coming up to an hour. It went by quick.
It did.
But we always do a little rapid fire fun.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that? I'm going to ask you some questions. You have to answer them.
Okay.
You know.
Do I have to be honest?
No, because if you lie, then I won't be able to tell.
Okay.
So, you know, don't overthink. First thing that comes to your mind. Are we ready?
No, not at all. But let's try.
Let's try. Jazz album everyone should hear once in their life.
You know, Someday My Prince Will Come by Miles Davis. It's not the Miles album that gets talked about a lot, but it's a bit of a sleeper album. Yeah.
A jazz musician that's passed, you'd time travel to see. And what era would that be?
That isn't alive anymore? Thelonious Monk, 1944.
Ooh, what was happening then in 1944?
He was basically creating or co-creating the music that we call bebop today, and he was one of the major founders of that.
Very cool. Current Vancouver jazz musician people should know about.
I'm going to name a few.
Yeah, you're allowed.
Because otherwise I'll get in a lot of trouble. Wonderful drummer just put out a brand new album on Cellar Live named Arvind Ramdas. He is just killing it right now. A great pianist who's actually doing a show for me this weekend at the China Cloud. His name is Jimmy James. Fantastic swinging piano player. Just a deeply swinging, incredible piano player. Faven Kadani, who we know. Faven has done more shows for Infidels than any other artist, and she has a lot of big shows coming up for us, like so many big shows. It's a very diverse scene. We're very fortunate.
Best record store you've ever been to in your life?
Oh, wow. Best record store I've ever been in my life is in Paris, France. And it is a jazz, it's a jazz, it only sells jazz. Nobody speaks any English. It's awkward and uncomfortable, and I could spend my whole life there.
Dream artist, alive or past, you'd book tomorrow?
There is a saxophonist and trumpeter named Joe McPhee who lives in upstate New York, who I idolize. He still tours a little bit. He is an experimental musician and is kind of one of the unsung heroes of that music. And if I could teleport him here tomorrow, I would.
Wow, thank you so much for this conversation, Tim.
Thank you so
It
much.
was really cool to get to know you, your history, your contribution to creating the Vancity creative scene. It's rich history, and it's something that I feel like now we got it archived and documented. And yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to share, but also that you just have such a passion and joy for this music, and that you are making it accessible to everyone to also enjoy it at every level that they're at. And I think that is something really beautiful and commendable.
Thank you. It was a real honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Yay. Well, shout outs to everybody who's tuned in on the live stream, to everyone who's going to watch the replay after. We appreciate you. This episode has been powered by TELUS STORYHIVE. And if you are an artist or creative, a dancer, musician, chef, and want to come and be a guest on this show, you can scan the QR code that's going to pop up on the edited version of this video and fill out the form. And you may be sitting next to me having all these wonderful snacks that we're going to dive into soon. My name is Kazi. This is Tim Reinert, and you could find them on @Infidels Jazz on Instagram or infidelsjazz.ca. That's right. And I hope to see you at some shows and also to meet the man himself. All right, y'all. Peace out. Thank you. This is StoryHive on location Vancouver with beats, eats, and
More.